Okay, everyone. Hello, good morning. So my name's Andrew Jack from the Financial Times. Pleasure to welcome you. Well done for making it this far into Davos, relatively early in the morning. So obviously, as you know, apart from a couple of international interventions, AI has probably been the real binding theme of Davos this year, not surprisingly, and not for the first time. And it's great, obviously, to be here to sort of reflect a little bit on the potential challenges and implications of that, and are we rushing too far? So our panel over the next hour is called, what is the exact title? Tech as a Tool, Not the Teacher, Putting Humanity Back in the Classroom. So we've got four great experts to reflect on that, and then very keen to hear also from you. So I'll switch to that towards the end of the session to hear any questions you have for our panel. And briefly, I'll introduce. So we have Ilana Ron-Levey, Managing Director of Gallup, Phil McRae, Executive Officer and Adjunct Professor of the Alberta Teachers Association, Ania Chowdhury, Strategy and Business Development at Rangeet, and Rebecca Winthrop, who's, of course, Senior Fellow and Director of the Centre for Universal Education at Brookings. So let's begin, and perhaps do a round robin, really, initially from our four speakers, just thinking about, we're seeing beyond the initial EdTech wave now, of course, AI coming into everything, or at least being nominally labelled around so many tools that are going into schools. I mean, what's our sense of the evidence base of tools with real impact and value compared to something of a sort of rush, perhaps, for taking up of tools where the evidence base is somewhat limited, or potentially where there are negative effects? Rebecca, do you want to kick off?
Sure. We have just finished a big task force initiative globally asking the question, are we on the right track with generative AI and students learning, particularly primary and secondary students? And we looked across the globe. We looked at benefits, we looked at risks, we looked at mitigation strategies, how do you harness the benefits, et cetera. And our basic finding was we're really not on the right track. The risks are overshadowing the benefits, and I should say for now, because it's a field that's moving incredibly fast. We did a sort of a year snapshot to just get what are the signals, what directions are we heading, and it's not that there are not benefits to generative AI being harnessed and used for students' learning and development in really narrow, intentional, scaffolded ways. So, with a teacher, with vetted content, integrated into really high quality pedagogy, generative AI can be quite helpful. It can also help access. So, there's also some great examples. For example, Afghan girls who are barred from secondary school, diaspora Afghan teachers using generative AI. Notice it's not straight to the kids. It's the teachers in the diaspora using generative AI to generate little WhatsApp lessons in the Afghan curriculum to keep these girls learning. So it can bring students into the sort of educational fold. But the problem is the risks we found are really of a different nature. They're undermining students' cognitive development. So where kids have access to generative AI, a lot of them are using it outside of school. And they're sort of, it's not just you shortcut, your homework once or twice. If you just use it once to shortcut your homework, fine. But kids are really using it to offload their thinking. And that means they're not developing the skills they need in this critical period to think independently, to learn independently. A lot of kids are interfacing with AI companions that are very sycophantic, which means they always agree with them, which really undermines their ability to hear feedback, which is what teaching is all about. You have to make mistakes. You can't learn if you go into a classroom and someone is giving you feedback and you don't want feedback because you're getting used to always being agreed with. So it is problematic, to say the least. We also found there's big problems with undermining trust between the teacher-student relationship. Never mind the things that are widely covered in the media, which is safety and security. So just if you just focus on the learning piece, we do really need to make sure we just don't have open, unscaffolded generative AI use with, any content in the world out there interfacing with kids with no oversight.
So anyway, we'll come back to some of those more detailed points and concerns in a minute. But yeah, from your sense, learning outcomes in particular, what evidence or what signs of best practice or kind of concerns do we have from what you're seeing amongst AI tools in the classroom?
So, Andrew, thank you. I want to take the conversation from AI to technology in general, because yesterday it was internet, today it's AI, tomorrow it may be quantum. So, if we look at the evolution of technology, and I want to talk about a developing country perspective. I'm from Bangladesh. I work in several countries now. My colleagues are from India. I want to sort of bring that perspective and talk about what I've seen in the last 22 years of EdTech experience that I've been through. About 22 years ago, I started a EdTech nonprofit focused on bringing technology to classrooms in Bangladesh. It didn't exist at that time, technology in classrooms. We thought that since teachers were not prepared, we would actually bypass them and just go to the students directly. The next experiment was with the government of Bangladesh, about 15 years in the making, where we introduced technology in the hands of teachers because we made a mistake in the first iteration. We bypassed teachers. So we said, okay, now let's engage teachers, empower them with technology. And we built a community of about 600,000 teachers over a 15-year period. Now the experiment with all the mistakes and the learnings and lessons are coming to Rangit. And you've heard from Simran, my CEO, 2 days ago. So in Rangit, we are focusing on developing social and emotional learning of children, because that's what it's all about, building emotional resilience in children through teachers. So that's the focus. So we learned 3 things. I always talk about 3. Simran tells me I cannot get out of those 3. The first thing is we cannot bypass teachers. We have to support them. So whatever technology we introduce, so if it's Gen AI or anything else that comes in the future, it has to support teachers in the classroom, because without teachers, there is no teaching, there is no education. But at the same time, we have to get out of the rut of memorization and regurgitation that dominates education in developing countries, and maybe in developed countries as well. The second thing we learned is that it has to be about agency of the students to become problem solvers in society. So generative AI can be applied, and Rebecca, you talked about the narrow AI, which I really liked, because the narrow AI, where AI can actually support teachers in their administrative tasks, but also, Ilana, you talked about it just now. So in administrative tasks, but also in teaching, maybe special ed kids where teachers don't have the right time or skills, maybe we can support that. And the third thing is, as I talked about, teachers, and this is a friend of mine in EdTech talks about teachers moving from the role of sage on the stage to guide on the side. So they become really true facilitators of knowledge in classroom, and Gen AI can really help in that process. Thank you.
And you said it just because we're talking about impact. What are you seeing in terms of the results with Rangit then in its latest iteration?
Yes. So in terms of impact, we are seeing higher confidence in teachers because now they become true facilitators. Before, they used to just follow textbooks and would basically have students memorize and regurgitate in exams. Now, because Rangit has over 1,000 activities focused on social emotional learning of children, these are activities that the teachers use in classrooms. The app is focused on teachers, not on children. So the teachers actually use these activities and facilitate conversation, engagement, empowerment with the students. We're seeing quantitative improvement in teachers' confidence, but also quantitative improvement in confidence of students in learning the subject matter. It could be environment, could be math, could be language. They're actually learning it better because they're engaging. And we are seeing, and Simran talked about some specific instances of how students are becoming agents of change in their community. There's this 10-year-old boy who stopped a child marriage in his neighbor, a 15-year-old girl. So there are numerous examples of such anecdotes coming out from Rangit classrooms.
So Phil, I'm sure you'd agree, not bypassing teachers is key. But what else are you seeing in terms just of the evolution of this space and what the real impact is?
Yeah, so it's difficult to be really clear on saying AI has improved this or that. I mean, there's so many variables in a classroom. What I can say is the saturation of artificial intelligence into education systems is fast and it's complete. I mean, we went from 1 and 2 teachers in Alberta in random stratified samples using AI in 2024 to 8 in 10 in 2025, and it will be almost universally there. In terms of impact on students and measurement, there's some interesting findings around trust in decline. And Rebecca talked a little bit about this, but the trust around, teachers will often talk about plagiarism and they'll say, did the student write it? But the students will also say, did the teacher mark it? So this goes both ways. And that's a trust dynamic that I think is a real question. There are also some phenomenon where young people now, because they're so embedded with using AI, to come up with ideas and to help with some of their planning, that they actually are freezing if they don't have access to AI tools. And I've heard that coming out of the junior high especially. And I think that's in terms of just scaffolding learning, that they have to have access to AI or else what do I do? And it really is becoming kind of the new Google, right? They're not just doing a Google search, and even Google searches have embedded AI algorithms into them. So yeah, it's a very fast trajectory of adoption.
And it isn't one of the key things, I suppose, that a lot of more traditional ed tech tools were very much sort of, there was a negotiation, there was a contract, whatever. I mean, Gen AI, any student, right, can just go out there and get access.
It's software, right? I mean, it's essentially software that moves across. It's being adopted and woven into all kinds of not just activities, but physicality, right? Things that come into the classroom, whether it's their watches or their phones, it's not necessarily put forward by the school system itself. So yeah, it's being able to definitively say through a measurement that this has improved learning or not. If we were to look at the OECD research on technology in general, they would say that ed tech implemented in the classroom has shown no significant statistical difference. So there's we can go back to some of the large scale studies and put a big question mark on it.
Sure. Ilona, I mean, tell us your perspective on what you're seeing in terms of perceptions around take-up of AI.
Yeah, I think going to the US perspective at Gallup, we have very large scale continual tracking of both teachers and Gen Z from 12 to 18 about their experiences with technology and education in general. And on AI specifically, I think adoption is not quite as high as some people think right now. I fully acknowledge that that's going to change, but right now, late 2025, we're seeing 6 in 10 American teachers saying they have used AI, but only about a third saying they're regularly using it. Now, I think what's interesting is what we're hearing is that teachers who do use AI say that the primary benefits that they see is just sort of making their jobs easier. Helps them automate lesson plans, curricular development, even, helping with some administrative tasks, getting ready for parent-teacher conferences where they have to write a lot. But they're not under the illusions that it actually helps students' creativity, learning, critical thinking. Now, on the student side, about 50% say they want to be taught AI in schools. And the reason that they primarily say that is because they think it's good for their future career development in that 12 to 18. But they too are not under the illusion that AI is going to help their capacity to really learn. I think when you step back, our research over the last 5 to 10 years has shown in the United States, we're really approaching a crisis in higher ed, and for teenagers sort of thinking about their futures, they're increasingly losing faith that schools are preparing them to have a meaningful and financially sustainable career. So I think that a lot of the focus on AI is about perceptions that they need to understand this technology to be able to get a good job. But I think it's quite concerning that neither students nor teachers are optimistic about the technology to improve learning outcomes. And I think that as students sense that teachers are primarily using this technology to save time for themselves, I think the question will be how much additional time can be put into quality of instruction, which we all know is what makes the difference in learning outcomes. So a lot to be seen, but I think we're coming with a position of skepticism right now.
So I'd like to hone down a bit. And Rebecca, you talked about what's being called cognitive offloading. I mean, it's a big concern. I mean, it's interesting when you look at the general levels of perception of how people are or aren't using, or say, what they think of the benefits or drawbacks. And there's not a lot of data on this, but the surveys I have seen, which actually look at the prompts, suggest there's a pretty transactional approach to a lot of the usage. So, and that seems to imply a lot of those higher order skills are risk being delegated, shall we say, to the machine. So, which to me also raises questions that, this is not just, as is often said, like the calculator replacing the slide rule, or, the arrival of spreadsheets. I mean, it feels to me much more existential. But does that resonate with you? And what are you seeing in terms of any evidence around what's actually happening to, particularly in young children with the brain still forming, what the implications are of that?
So thank you for mentioning the calculator. I do hear this everywhere, and it makes my head explode. It is not like the calculator. Just for the record, if you ever hear anybody say this, tell them, okay, the calculator automated arithmetic and various other math functions. It didn't make possible thinking, writing across every single subject in school, and pretending to be a friend and interpersonal relationships. It's completely different. So, okay, thank you. That gets my pet peeve. I feel better already. So in terms of evidence, so we really, really have to make a distinction. Again, the Center for Humane Technology talks about narrow AI and wide AI. So narrow AI is when AI is used, and often something is overlaid on it. Kids are not sitting in front of ChatGPT or even sort of learn, ChatGPT learn, or they have different names. It's things like textbooks that kids are reading through that have AI embedded in it. First of all, the content is vetted. It's not the entire internet, which is a huge problem in sort of what I call the Wild West AI or the wide AI. And kids will be, reading, maybe reading through something and they don't get it. And they'll type in, I've read this paragraph 3 times. I'm really not understanding it. Can you explain it to me in a different way, please? And that seems to work really well, particularly for multilingual learners, for neurodivergent kids, kids with learning disabilities. So there is evidence. Again, our study was like, where are we headed? What are the early signals before it's too late? And so there is evidence, small pockets of evidence showing that that very narrow intentional use of AI does help learning. It helps improve understanding. And actually, especially for kids who are sort of most struggling, it helps them gain some confidence, which helps their motivation. So there is, again, good parts with narrow AI. Now, the problem is the wide AI use, which is direct interfacing with frontier model chatbots. It could be through AI companions. A lot of kids are going on social media. There's AI friends in social media, and they, have funds, talk to the AI friends, and then upload their homework and say, please do my essay and my math homework, and the AI friend does it. So kids are getting it everywhere. And we found lots and lots of evidence that this is really problematic for kids' thinking skills. Lots of evidence that even if you give kids say you can use AI for, a bit to assist your writing. Well, if you're not actually doing the deep processing of thinking about what you want to write, lots of evidence showing that when kids sort of collaborate or use sort of, again, these open-ended chatbots, you at the end and you say, okay, so tell me about what you wrote. Tell me about what you learned. They don't remember. They don't remember because they never learned it. That to me is the core of the problem. And we keep talking about cognitive offloading. And we use that term as well in our report. And we had a huge debate, like, is it cognitive offloading? Well, cognitive offloading, any neuroscientist, we interviewed many neuroscientists for this, will tell you human beings are predisposed, evolutionarily designed to cognitively offload. That is why I do not know how to go into the forest and pick the berries that I can eat and survive. Like humanity is cognitively offloaded. That's why we are, sitting in this incredible building and we go to grocery stores. So cognitive offloading is just using any tool to sort of not have to remember, not have to learn this so we can do other things. The problem is when you cognitively offload the ability to learn, which is what we're worried about with kids. And it's not really cognitively offloading because kids are never learning it in the first place to offload. So I think we need a new term, something like cognitive stunting, something like that. And nutrition, if you don't, pediatricians worry about stunting. If kids don't get the right nutrients when they're young at critical periods, they physically can't grow, their brains can't develop. So I think it's more like that, that's the big risk.
I wonder, Phil, if we almost need a new way to think about some of those skills, critical thinking. What does it actually really mean, and how do we train it, support it, assess it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good debate because I've been thinking a lot about cognitive offloading versus something called cognitive atrophy, right? Because you have some skills and then they atrophy. You pull back because you're not using them, which is really, when you talk about critical thinking, it's the ability to take a criticality and then use that and question. I mean, the essential question has always been, the Socratic moment, right? The ability to ask the right questions. I do think that this is probably one of the primary concerns that teachers have, this loss of the ability to do some things that are deep learning, which comes from deep learning. And what that means over time is pretty frightening. If you think about a school system that starts to lose some of those ability to actually spend time reading something in full, not the ChatGPT 3-sentence summary of X book, right? So it has other implications when everything is instant, when I can get what I want, when I want, how I want it, basically hyper personalized in 2 lines. Because there is a skill in, as anybody who's written, as you live in your world, writing and rewriting and thinking and rethinking. And is that the right way that I need to frame it? Even cognitive offloading versus cognitive atrophy. We've started to lean in our research and communication around cognitive atrophy as really the skill or the impact that we're seeing with AI right now in education.
Well, of course, atrophy implies there was something and then it's declined, right? Whereas if we're starting in young kids, we may not even be developing those.
Exactly.
We had such a debate when we wrote this, like cognitive offloading. There's no words. There's no words for having children not develop skills. I mean, we're evolutionarily designed to learn and develop. How can it be? Is it cognitive atrophy? But atrophy implies that you had something to weaken in the first place. So maybe it's atrophy later for younger kids. I mean, I can't tell you.
It's undiscovered country.
And
right?
then we just said, forget it. We're just going to call it cognitive offloading because the report is due. But
the scientists.
But we were part of it, and it was a great debate to talk about.
But the point is, we don't actually have paradigms or words to describe what's going on. Yeah,
stunting is
I think cognitive stunting. I don't know. Well, we'll put it to a vote. Yeah.
And Ilona, anything you're picking up in your research around those sort of perceptions or concerns amongst parents and others around intellectual development?
And I think I actually want to talk about social development because I think Rebecca, exhaustively covered the concerns on intellectual development. The only thing I would add is we're not exactly starting from a place where learning outcomes were on a growth trajectory pre-AI. So in many countries of the West, we're starting in a situation where we're seeing declines in learning outcomes before this technology was even introduced. So I think additional concern. But let's talk about the social dimension attention. I think that we see in the US that we're in an epidemic of loneliness for young people. The majority of young Americans say, based on our tracking, that they don't have a friend that they can count on in a time of need. The quality of their friendships are declining at a time where maybe they have, additional quantity in online friendships. Kids are just hanging out less. They're not going to people's houses as much. They're spending enormous amounts of time out of school online. And I think that, in our surveys, sort of pre-AI, school was sometimes a kind of turnaround point for that, especially with schools that banned phones. That it's like, look, in my social life, all I do is sit on the couch on Friday night and text my friends. I don't want to go to their houses. I don't want to go to parties anymore. But at least at school, we can hang out. And I think the concern for me is that on that wide AI and sort of the broad-based back and forth and chatbot-driven AI, that one place of refuge where social connections could be formed are probably going to be further impeded. And there's just lifelong outcomes for lack of social connections and social literacy. Higher stress, higher pervasive negative emotions, poor physical health. And then on the career side, when every single person is going to be applying for jobs with, AI-driven cover letters, and there's no real ability to discern on a skills basis anymore, those social dimensions and the way that you connect with other humans likely is going to be kind of that primary skill that stands out. So if you're losing that ability, we all make more friends when we're 22 and under. When we've changed that and you're not making those friendships as young people and schools aren't helping you as much, I think there's going to be really negative lifelong outcomes. And I think parents are very, very concerned about that. Safety and security has always been kind of, Rebecca, I like how you said that there's so much attention to the safety and security concerns, but the stunted social and learning development are, I think, rapidly coming up to the top of concerns for parents.
Yeah, I guess obviously more traditional tech, shall we say, the previous generation, already there's all the issues of screen time and addiction and isolation. But Anir, obviously now with these newer tools, chatbots, this whole idea of, personas and direct emotional support, how much is that sort of turbocharging and creating concerns?
Well, let's talk about the purpose of schools. And I'll make a distinction between the advanced schools. We're working in very advanced schools in Mumbai and underprivileged schools in Rajasthan and also outside of Mumbai. Now, in the advanced schools, the children have access to Gen AI. Teachers do as well. And the social emotional bond is weakening there. In the underprivileged schools where children don't have access to Gen AI, there teachers are using Gen AI and the Rangit curriculum, the C curriculum as we call it, social, emotional, ecological knowledge. And there, the activities are happening facilitated by teachers. These are physical activities of students. So the social, emotional bond is, Ilana, that you talked about, is actually strengthening. And now we're expanding that support to parents as well. So that parents can also become facilitators of social, emotional bond in the household setting with grandparents, with siblings, with cousins. So interestingly, the more advanced schools are going to the cognitive atrophy, decline, offloading, whatever you want to call it. And the less privileged schools
Stunting.
are actually stunting.
I like stunting. I actually like, I think we've just found agreement. I like stunting.
The stunting.
Rebecca, high five.
It's not good in any case.
Sorry.
And the less privileged schools, the ones where we aspire to become the more, like one school we're working with, Cathedral, one of the top schools in India. I think that's happening more there than in underprivileged schools in Rajasthan, because that is where social emotional support is actually happening. And one thing I'd also like to add, Andrew, is from Rangit, we're also supporting teachers in their social emotional learning as well. They have a lot of stress. managing classrooms. They have a lot of stress from administrative work that's actually offloaded to them from the general administration. They are doing census, they are doing election duties. I don't know whether that happens in Western countries. I'm not
No,
sure.
no.
Not
You
as
should
much.
explain briefly that a lot of
Actually,
teachers in India, Pakistan
Yeah.
are also electoral poll workers
Yes,
assigned
yes.
to not just teach, but go and man local elections. So they have to lead. I mean,
Right.
it's,
So they're
it's
the most
incredibly hard.
respected and most educated members of community. So they're entrusted with other non-teaching responsibilities, and that takes up 20, 30, 50% of their time sometimes. So they're actually overloaded, and we're actually providing technology, Gen AI technology, to support that stress as well. So they come in and they say, okay, today this is what I'm feeling today, and Gen AI actually supports them. So that's a very specialized use of Gen AI technology in the context of a school to support teachers so that they do well with the students, and they do what they are supposed to do with students.
Just to be clear on so what are your learnings in terms of the appropriate and the inappropriate use, as it were, of AI tools around particularly child social and emotional development? What's the sort of the rule book that you're thinking of?
Sure. So I think I agree with Ilana. There is no conclusion yet. But I think what happens is because Gen AI or any technology is very addictive, and once it's introduced, it's adopted very quickly. So in the underprivileged schools, Gen AI is not in the hands of students yet. But as soon as they become available, affordable, then that stunting decline is going to happen. And we are seeing, because technology is being made available, affordable to students and households. So when that happens, I think that decline, that downward spiral will actually happen. We're actually seeing signs of that in so-called government-supported underprivileged schools getting access to technologies, internet and Gen AI.
Yes, an important point about inequity of access to technology and so
Right.
on, both within as well as between countries.
Yes, absolutely. So inequity is I mean, the way I've always talked about it before in my government position is that we have to provide equitable technology access to everybody. But now I'm actually rethinking, I'm really rethinking whether the technology that's harmful, that's actually causing decline, stunting, offloading, whether that should really be introduced. And if it's introduced, it should be introduced in a very responsible way. So instead of, we talked about this in one of the earlier panels, is that whether wide AI should really be introduced as a nuclear power in the hands of somebody who doesn't know how to use it. Perhaps what we should do is build specific technologies on top of Gen AI for age-appropriate, learning-appropriate solutions. That's exactly what we're doing for teachers. So why not for students? So what do the students need at a specific point in their life? So build that on top of ChatGPT. Instead, we are giving ChatGPT the entire technology that's not appropriate for them.
I just wanted to pick up on your point, Andrew, that, you know, we looked a lot at everything in this very massive review, and inequality was one of the dimensions. And the standard conventional wisdom is the communities that have broadband, have access to technology, including Gen AI, are probably more privileged than lower income communities who don't have access to internet or Gen AI. And really, we found in this case, it probably is that it probably has to do with students' a personal level of motivation, but also educational scaffolding. So there are some students who are highly, highly motivated. We talked to some of them who are using wide AI to they're just like the 0.01% to go and research everything they're interested in and, you know, practically getting a university degree in high school because they're just so motivated. The next rung down, the inequality between them is not necessarily the kids who don't have Gen AI, it's the really unmotivated students, what I call passenger mode students, who are just like, well, this is great. I'm just not, don't have to do any work. And that's where a lot of the cognitive stunting, offloading, atrophy, we can use them all, happens. And they're really now much more disadvantaged than the kids who don't have access to sort of direct chat bots and are still actually learning through deep, having to think through things and puzzle things out. So it's kind of flipped where the inequity divides are. And in some ways, I think that the kids in the late adopter communities might have a silver lining to learn from the mistakes that the early adopter communities of Gen AI make and maybe leapfrog over it into a better, healthier, more narrow, impactful, productive use in the future.
And just continuing the theme around the social emotional as opposed to the cognitive, should we say? Any other kind of insights from your research there about what's going on?
Yeah, it's bad. Is the technical term. So we found a lot. So dependence, a lot of, if a student uses a chat bot for one homework assignment once, they'll be fine. No one is going to worry about them. The issue is you start using it regularly. And as Phil said, so many of the kids we interviewed, teachers we interviewed, studies we reviewed, kids really started being very dependent on it. So kids would say things like, I don't know how to do my work if I don't have it now. Like, I can't get started. I can't figure out the next step without it. Like, incredible dependence. And that is you're talking about social emotional, that's very demotivating. So engagement, motivation is really crucial to learning. So demotivating, lack, and then reduced. I have many co-authors. One of my co-authors told me, I remember this discussion. She said, I wonder if one of the worst outcomes is not lack of trust in the teacher or the teacher talking about plagiarism, but students' lack of trust in themselves and their ability to think and learn. So reduction of confidence. And then you get it, and that's just from over-reliance on the cognitive dimension. Then you get into all the stuff around retraining kids' sort of relational and social emotional muscles through one student said, we're developing different emotional muscles. I think he said emotional muscles, because again, it's sycophantic. It always agrees with you. It says you're the most amazing thing. You have the best ideas in the world. And then you go to a teacher who's like, that's wrong. That isn't the best idea in the world. Or a parent who is like, actually, sweetheart, that's really not appropriate. And it becomes very hard to figure out how to relate to other people and to learn. And then there's all the stuff which is around safety and security, which is terrible, and which is around, again, if anyone says it's like a calculator, does a calculator tell a child how to commit suicide with direct instructions on how to tie the knot in the rope? No, it doesn't. But a ChatGPT does, right? Yeah.
So then, just following up from what Rebecca said, then Gen AI is actually widening the education divide instead of bridging it, right? So it's actually widening the cognitive divide because only the most motivated benefit from it, not the general students, 99%. So we're actually making the ones who are already ahead even further ahead. Ones who are behind fall further behind because they're cognitively going to be behind. Socially and emotionally, they're also going to be weaker.
We did say, is there a new dimension of inequality that's being introduced, not just socio-emotional, rural, urban, but is there a cognitive divide dimension?
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's one more, there's probably many more, but one more layer of inequity, I think, is about parenting quality. We have a new book coming out in a couple months, and I just want to give a preview where we took hundreds of thousands of cases in our global surveys where, we do a ton of tracking on subjective well-being and life evaluation. And we have variables about adults reflecting on just the quality of the relationship that they had with their parents. And then we did a bunch of adjacent surveys of parents and children separately from the same families to, again, assess their relationships. And what we saw was that in terms of predicting subjective well-being, lifelong positive outcomes, the quality of the parenting relationship was the most important variable above and beyond anything else related to educational outcomes or health or income or college education. And there was a particular parenting style that was most associated with positive outcomes for mental health for young people. And that was sort of a loving form of discipline. And I think that that gets to, Rebecca, what you're saying, that a parent that has expectations and structure and does say, hey, that is a really bad idea, or you're probably not going to become a professional basketball player, but here's what you might be good at, but still has this sort of consistent love and warmth, has a far better chance of raising a child with strong mental health and resilience than a parent that just sort of gives in to everything that their child asks for, just always says you're the best person. We specifically looked at social media use, and for children that felt that they had strong relationships with their parents and had high parenting quality, higher social media use, they were able to weather that better than kids who had lower social media use but worse relationships with their parents. So it remains to be seen if this will hold true for AI use. My guess is it will, but I think that this combination of unsupervised AI use with poor parenting quality and parental-child relationships is a real recipe for disaster.
So I'm going to try and weave three different things that
Going
are
in a
going
lot
on.
of directions.
So artificial intelligence is an accelerator. It amplifies. There's a lot of things, and I totally agree with Rebecca. This is a new phenomenon. This is not ed tech as we've seen it before, and we need to be really clear that this is significantly different as an introduction. I mean, if you're talking about, hacking the human language and an AI like a sycophant with a developing child, that is a fundamentally different thing than, an ed app on, literacy numeracy. So I think in terms of what Ilana said about the social emotional domain, teaching and learning is about learning with each other. It's socially constructed. If you actually look at learning, it's not individualized with a machine. There has been this fascination for 100 years of the teaching machine. If I can plug you in individually with the whatever you want to call it, then you will learn faster, you will learn more. Give me a break, right? I mean, that's just, we're not there yet. That idea, and I don't think we ever will be. I think the species is wired to socially engage. That's how learning takes place. But young people do have brittle social worlds right now. They have higher anxiety, depression. We have a direct line over 10 years around social media and the impact that that's had in our schools. We've done lots of work internationally with many different researchers at universities, and there is no question that there's a significant challenge there. Equity and inequities and using AI to bridge inequities. If you really look at inequities, they're socioeconomic, right? They're deep structural societal issues. And right now we have 6 to 10 primarily men that have, 90% of the wealth on the planet? I mean, the concentration of wealth and inequity is profoundly shifting. So inequity is about food security. Inequity is about, during COVID, we found in our research studies that people even having a quiet place to study. Some did, many were taking care of their siblings, and because the parents were working, they didn't, inequity is a broad issue. I think that if we were to look at what schools need, that schools are connection zones, not transaction zones. They're zones where you learn to be with each other. You learn how to be with yourself, but as well how to really engage with others in public schools in Alberta that you'll go into the workforce and into the rest of your life having some of those skills, right? Social emotional domains. So those are really important, but also with the emergence of AI and its saturation, things like curiosity and creativity, which comes from boredom, actually. Being bored is what spurs you on to be creative. We need to bring back boredom in some respects. So these are really interesting things that are almost, it's like an evolution from social media to now AI as this supercharging, accelerating, amplifying force. But fundamental to the human condition is that desire to engage in that social construction of learning, that social emotional art of conversation. And if the schools are not able to reinforce and support that, then we're in for some really challenging times ahead.
I'm conscious of time, so maybe let's open it up. Who might have some questions? There's one at the back first, I think, please. Yeah, on the left. My left. Yeah, over there, yeah. Who's the first hand?
Oh,
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the great talk. I have a question. If after what we heard today and in the past days, we have a strong case for not only phone-free schools, but also AI-free schools. I'd like to hear what you think. And maybe also a very broader change in the way teaching methodologies work. Imagine you can use AI at home on very narrow, specific tasks that your teachers may assign you, like write this sentence, ask AI to challenge it, and then write a counter-challenge argument to what AI tells. And when you are in classroom, much more presentation skills, debating, back to oral exams, back to group assignments. Let me know what you think about that. That's what we try to preach here in Switzerland in the schools.
Thanks. Who wants to go?
So, I mean, in terms of, I don't think it's realistic to think we'll have AI-free schools. I think artificial intelligence is actually going to be so pervasive that it would be very smart phone-free schools, which we have in Alberta. We have legislation. It's a physical device, right, that you can remove. So that's where you could have a phone-free school. But I think if you're talking about approaches that can harness AI, there are lots, and I think Ilana had said this and Rebecca said this, there are some promising practices. So for example, if I have a class of 23 students, and in my class I have 2 children who have orthographic processing challenges, and I'm not really familiar how to differentiate my work with those students, I am going to use artificial intelligence to help build some resources, very specifically to help me in a pedagogical way, working with that child. So I mean, that's a really profound access to intelligence. So you can look at AI as an explosion of intelligence, and now as a teacher, I have more access to intelligence. But the downside of that is I'm just going to turn over this student's private data or whatever and let the AI diagnose and then treat, a human being, right? It's that idea of turning over this moral agency around things. So there's almost a continuum of how far you use it pedagogically, and that's the example of, well, I'm just going to upload papers and let the AI mark it. Young people want a human being to read their work and then have a discussion with them. I think where we're starting to go in education in an AI-saturated world will be much more performance assessment, much more real world. Talk to me about what you've learned. Show me how you do this. And I think that is going to become much more commonplace than just write a paper and, tell me what that looks like.
I mean, from my perspective, I think it's probably completely unrealistic to not allow teachers access to AI for curriculum development, offloading some administration tasks. I think that's here to stay and will just increase. And I think expectations should be raised with those time savings. What are you doing to improve the quality of instruction, which is ultimately what's most important. But I mean, I think for children and for young people, to me, the question is supervised versus unsupervised access to AI and social media, both at home and at school. In a controlled setting, and I'm curious, Rebecca, what you think. In a controlled setting where you're using it for a particular kind of stretch assignment and you're learning about, here's the way you evaluate output from AI, or, thinking about the Gallup world and you're learning how to write survey questions and you say, let's pull up all the survey questions that were ever asked on this topic so we can see what's validated. Whatever it is, that's completely different than just a long-term unsupervised access. I feel like there's a growing number of parents who say we want to hold schools to higher standards, and part of that is not only phone-free schools, but strong supervision, high expectations, and ensuring that critical thinking and learning is happening. And I think that that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, the AI free, I think it's unrealistic. I agree with Phil, because AI is not going to be in your device. AI will be wearing AI. It's going to be in my glasses. If Elon Musk is successful, it'll be inside my brain. So you can't. It's going to be pervasive. But the idea is not to have an AI free environment, just like we don't have a fire free home or a knife free home. We create protection. And companies create that protection. So how we use fire in the home, we don't keep it open. We have it contained in specific locations. So that's what we need to create. So supervision is important, but companies, the providers of these technologies, have to create the kill switch and have to create the right protective environments and sell those things. It's not about not making money. It's about making even more money by giving us specialized tools for AI, not generalized tools that we have in the hands like we have. If we had nuclear power in our hands, that's exactly where we would be. But we don't have it. We have it in a small, usable, digestible, useful chunks. That's what the companies will have to do for us.
Yeah, just really briefly, and I know, Andrew, there's lots of other questions. On your question, I think we need to really commit, and my colleagues at Brookings and I talk about this, to making schools the most human experience possible. So for the 7 7 hours a day, depends on which part of the world you're in, for that, 5 to 8 hours a day, however many weeks a year that kids are in schools, that a large percentage of it is human to human interaction, because outside, if they're in communities that currently don't have a lot of technology, it's probably coming. Because we can control that. But I'm not saying 100%. Some families may want that, which is fine. But I do think there is room, like everybody else said, to prepare kids and to help them use this technology to do really good things. A recent school I looked at is teaching kids machine learning in order to do their science projects. It's in Hawaii, and they are using machine learning to measure sea levels to see if their village is going to be overwashed. They don't have, chatbots that they're sitting in front of screens. They're out there. They're, out there doing stuff, and then they put the data in, and they learn about data and where it comes from and how it can be manipulated. And that also gives them a lot of good insight around technology in the online world. So that's where I think we need to go.
Thanks. Maybe we check a couple together. One in the back there, perhaps.
Thank you. Athena Demos. My question is actually an observation. You mentioned that the students in India were the schools that were wealthier had access, and the schools that did not. In the US, we always, the wealthier schools had the computers and they have the iPads and they have access to all this stuff, and that was an advantage. And now what you're saying is it's actually going to become a disadvantage, that the wealthier schools are going to have the AI and the students are going to use it, but then the more that they do, we're going to see those students, those children have the stunting, which I think is a really good term.
I'm winning, Phil.
I think it's one. I'm with you. I like
Hey, you
it.
turned
Cognitive
it.
I'm
stunting.
teasing. I'm
Turned
teasing.
it.
It's great.
Okay,
But-
sorry,
but
it's a
we're-
question because we really need to take a couple of
Okay,
minutes. But yeah,
so
yeah.
so my question is do you see that school advantage turning into a disadvantage with the bringing in of AI into the schools?
Okay, there was another question I think next to you. Although there, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, yep, yep. And then
Hi,
one
I
at the front.
just wanted to talk about teacher technology self-efficacy. Teachers reporting that they have low techno-pedagogical skills. Now we're asking teachers to teach with AI. Teachers do not have AI self-efficacy. And who's training teachers to teach with AI? Because there's no model to show that teaching with AI actually improves student outcomes. So I see this as a big fat mess.
Thank you, thank you. And one at the front here, please.
Thank you. I'm the founder of a nonprofit in California that did enrichment programs, so sleepaway environmental education programs starting in 2006. And last week I met with another founder and we were like, remember the good old days from 2006 to 2013? We were worried about bullying, sex, and drugs. After 2013, it's anxiety, depression, and self-harm. Like kids are too wimpy to try drugs or have sex. But is there a possibility that AI could make the specific learning so efficient and personalized that the teacher then has all this time for project-based learning to go out into community, to take kids into the forest, which is what we do. And then the highly skilled teacher is, an incredible facilitator of group process and community engagement. And that actually, what now takes 8 hours with a kind of a burned out, overloaded teacher, no offense, I love teachers, but trying to do this, especially in the US, like teaching to the test, all this stuff, that could be 3 hours, and then they could be out learning, project, all that.
Okay, thanks. We're out of time technically, but so 30 seconds.
Okay, here we go. So with yours, the marketing right now around AI is the personalized tutor. I totally disagree with this. It's actually, you need to put the person back in personalization, right? I mean, this idea of AI becoming the personalized tutor and teacher and so on, I think is just, right now it's marketing. In terms of professional development and the question of teachers, there's three things. There's having the time. Teachers don't right now, with compressed and work intensification, even have some of the time. They need the time, they need the training or the professional development, but they also need to have professional autonomy and trust. This is being taken away. You're going to use this system. This is how it is. It's put in by usually a technologist or somebody who's sold something to the school system, and there needs to be a little more trust. And then to the third question, digital dropouts, as we call them, are actually in the higher socioeconomic right now. So people who can say, no, I'm going to take you to a forest school or something else, they will basically be the ones, I mean, we heard this in Silicon Valley with Waldorf schools and others. It's trying to be able to, we're seeing that digital dropouts in the higher socioeconomic.
Rebecca, since you won the stunting debate,
Yes.
you get the final word.
Okay, great. Well, just on your question, I think there is a way for generative AI to push the education system to do what you're talking about, which is not us doing sort of reacting to AI. It's actually AI being a catalyst to what learning science and good pedagogues have always wanted education to be, which is not just knowledge acquisition, but learn knowledge and go do something with it, because that is what's sustainable. And I think I'm going to waive this. I have an extra copy if anyone wants it. This is our big report. It's all online. There's also many smaller versions, executive summaries of it. But that's one of our first recommendations, is that we in education have to change our pedagogy, like today, tomorrow, and we have control over it. I also want to waive, for the parenting issue, we found that parents really need advice and guidance. And so we're creating a whole series, started creating a whole series of tip sheets for parents on AI that distills the findings in the report so they have the power to sort of play their part. So also find those online too.
10 seconds.
Sure. So just to be clear, I'm not anti-AI. I'm a technologist. I led the AI strategy and policy of Bangladesh at the national level. But AI can cause a lot of harm. So we need to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of schools? We all agreed that it's social engagement. What is the purpose of a teacher? To facilitate learning. What is the purpose of a student? To actually solve problems in society, in their community, and maybe at a national, international level. So is AI helping us achieve those three things in the school, for teachers, and for students? If it is doing that, then it's great. If it's not doing it, then it's actually causing more harm than good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much. So we're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. I think this area needs to be cleared for another reception, but I think you're welcome to move to the bar for some networking over the next time. So thanks very much. Do thank our panel.
Thank you, Andrew.